I want to bring at this moment Dr. Anjal Prakash. She's Research Director at the Bharati Institute of Public Policy and author of the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Dr. Prakash, give us the solutions. We have identified the problem. The recognition is out there, particularly even among locals, that this is a serious climate emergency. What is the solution? Why is it that, what will it take to shake the governments into action at state and center?
Yeah. So, this, as you know, Wayanad case has been there for a long time. There is in 2011, the Madhav Gadgil report has come, which was accepted in 2014. This has been 10 years since then, and things have not moved. And then the strategy that you've seen is appalling for all of us. And this means that we have to work across party line. And this is not only about Wayanad, but it's a entire ecological fragility of the Western Ghat which is at stake. So we have to move forward, and we have to form a committee which is all-party committee where everyone has to contribute to this whole process. That consensus has to reach. First, there has to be a political consensus, and second is that you have to take other stakeholders into account, which is unfortunately not happening. That's number one. Number two is also about the, in the political hierarchy that we are seeing, that blame game started every time a climate catastrophe like this strikes. We only see a blame game. We don't see an action towards that. The third point is about the, institutional framework. We also have to see that every time it's not only about Wayanad. But today when we are talking, we also see that the problems are happening in Himachal Pradesh, in the Himalayan states. The kind of a rainfall that is unprecedented. Every year that you see that these incidents are taking over and breaking all the records of the last year. Now, I am saying that we must go for a separate ministry for climate change, because climate change is becoming a very, very, what I would say, prominent phenomena. Every season there's something that we are talking about, but we are not doing much about it. And that's where the problem lies, that we are institutionally also, we are not coming into one line and trying to see.
So you're calling for
Yeah.
You're calling for some kind of a nodal ministry that looks at climate change, that then works with other ministries in a way. Akshay Devras, give us global examples. How have other countries across the world dealt with it? Can you give us of a successful example which could be replicated in India?
Give you one example of tornadoes in the US, and we can't really have an apple-to-apple comparison, but that's a very interesting comparison. So they do get a lot of tornadoes in central parts of the US. That's what they call as the Tornado Alley. And tornadoes, again, are quite local. So just think about all these rainfall events. They have been very localized. So we do have problems when it comes to forecasting localized events, because weather prediction models do a very good job when it comes to predicting bigger things, like, for example, tropical cyclones. But over smaller scales, there are limitations. So tornadoes are very local, and there are also a lot of people who live there. But in the US, they have got a very robust surveillance and warning system, in which what happens is that they have got a very dense network of Doppler radars. They would keep on surveilling things, and whenever they see a tornado forming, they would just send out alerts straight away on the phone of people. So you just get an alert straight away on your phone. Look at what is happening in India. So it's not just Wayanad. Just zoom out a bit. Look at Delhi. So 28th of June, 31st of July, 2 events when you just get extreme rainfall in less amount of time. We don't have specific warnings for the day. Next day, holiday is declared, there is red alert, but nothing happens. So all this thing needs to stop. And this is going to stop only when we get into a situation where we improve the surveillance of these clouds. We keep people away from all this ecologically sensitive zone. And we just tell them straight away that, okay, the storm is heading in your direction. Just prepare. That's it.
You're saying, therefore, it is possible to have these early warning systems and communicate them effectively to people. Sandeep Chachra, you have a solution. Where would you start? If you were asked, give me a solution to this climate change emergency, where would you start, Mr. Chachra?
I would start with framing the entire climate emergency, climate debate, or what we have, this discussion, in a justice framework. So it is, in reality, as Sunita ji was also referring to, the question of climate justice, of differential responsibilities and differential sort of suffering. So I think it's very important, and in order to also create social pressure, it's very important to frame the debate in a historically and contemporary correct manner, a class debate, a debate of what is called climate justice. So I think first thing first, I think the role of the state and therefore the role of public investment, whether it's in building urban commons, rural commons, policy on commons is fundamental. The role of the welfare state in public investments in cities, in the countryside, to build onto adaptation so that people can adapt and to build into solutions, the resilient solutions or the what is called the climate resilient solutions, whether it's to do with agriculture, whether it's to do with how our cities today are, essentially grey infrastructures and hellholes in many, many ways, as you can see. So the role of public investment and therefore of the state oversight and the state responsibility, and therefore of the ownership of the state responsibility in compensating people who are suffering on account of no fault of theirs. And these are popular classes of India, and the numbers are huge. So compensating, protecting, ensuring future livelihoods, ensuring their habitats or relocated habitats that Rajdeep you referred to, in some cases from very ecologically fragile areas. And then thirdly, and quickly, the check and regulation on private reality developers in cities or random private development with totally commercial interest, totally ramping over people, the planet itself. So I think that needs to be regulated. The strong arm of the state needs to focus there. And I think that's been a weak spot across. You see it in cities, you see it in, you're talking of Western Ghats, Dr. Gadgil was speaking to it, Sunita ji was speaking to it, exactly that. Tourism, highways, unchecked kind of roads for promoting tourists at the cost of people who live there, the tribals who live there. So I think these are some of the pathways we need to build together. And finally, I want to conclude on this particular point by saying that this unleashes a public pressure. Therefore, the need to have a public discourse and this debates like this, but many more. But I think a public pressure and a building of public discourse, which is fomenting on the ground, is fundamental to resolve issues in a democratic, accountable manner in the framework of rights and justice. So that's how I would like to sort of approach the solutions. Yeah. Thank you.
The fact is, but these solutions, the so-called democratic solutions, Sunita Narayan, we've seen with the church in Kerala. The church also did not support the Gadgil report. Civil society group, we saw in Joshimath, when people were being moved last year from areas which had developed cracks, there was a reluctance on the part of people to move out of areas where they've lived for years, for decades. In Himachal Pradesh, people, can you really move them out of some of these eco-sensitive zones? Instead, what you've got is construction taking place in areas which were earlier very pristine. So when you say that locals have understood the challenge of climate emergency and are ahead of policymakers, is that really the case? Is civil society really recognizing the challenge, or is this not a top priority in a country where millions live ultimately in very basic conditions on the margins? Can they be expected to suddenly up and leave these eco-fragile areas or change their lifestyle in some way?
Rajiv, that's a very good question, but I think you're also pushing all of us into solutions. So let me make it very clear. There is a solution here. The fact is, it's not about moving people. And I think that is the worst solution that we could ever offer. When it came to Joshimath, let me make it very clear. You know, and I know, the Joshimath tragedy is about the mindless way in which we are making hydroelectric projects in the fragile, extremely fragile, high Himalayan zone. It had nothing to do with the local people that their town is sinking, and now you're asking them to move. The development that was wrong was the back-to-back. I'm in favor of hydroelectric projects. My problem is the way they were conceptualized to be back-to-back. And it's the same when it comes to Western Ghats. I don't think you should please frame this to say that ecologically sensitive region means people must leave. What you have to frame it to say is, what is the kind of development that is good for people and good for the ecology? And that's the question that we have never really explored. And we need to explore, because the only thing that we know is to make a a large shopping mall wherever we go. And if the shopping mall has a lot of glass, that is what we see as a sign of modernity. Now, the fact is, in these ecologically fragile areas, you will need to have livelihood options for the very poor people, for anyone. You cannot talk about locking up people, places. Now, even if you talk about locking up places, which also may be needed, given the ecological fragility, you will have to talk about compensating people who live there. The 14th Finance Commission report, or the 15th, I can't remember, had a very interesting, or 13th it was, had a very interesting concept of compensating states for the forest that they would not cut. So normally you say, don't cut a forest, but they don't get paid for it. Unfortunately, Rajdeep, and I think this is where our collective ability to argue has never been there, has been that Finance Commission report was whittled away in later Finance Commissions, and it's now nothing but a fund that goes to the general state, and I'm told in the last Finance Commission, it was removed. But this is the concept of ecological payment. You say, this is a region very fragile. You cannot have development here, but you still have to live. So let's have a payment to you for the protection of this ecological area, which you, me, and everyone has to pay for. So there are ways out, Rajdeep. And I think the point that Akshay made is also very important, that in an age of climate change, just as we need to find a development model which is compatible with nature, compatible with people, we will also have to find a way in which we greatly improve our monitoring systems and advisories on weather. And I think that point of Akshay's is very important to note, because yes, we have them, but not enough. The only success story India has, and something that we can be very proud of, is the way we manage cyclones. And we have an excellent forecasting system of cyclones and a way to inform people about cyclone so that evacuation happens. Landslides are very difficult to predict.
That's exactly it, because there has been this talk of early warning systems that were given, but locals say there was no red alert the day before, and therefore the people in and around the villages in Wayanad were not evacuated in time, and there's been this huge blame game between the centre and state. But you're right, cyclones have shown what's possible with early warning system. Akshay, you mentioned tornadoes in the west. So in a way, it's going to have to be communities, the local stakeholders, governments, environmentalists all working together. We cannot remain in silos, presumably, Akshay, anymore. We're going to all have to work together on this. Am I correct? Including the media. I mean, how many debates do we have on climate change? Very few. It takes a Wayanad for even channels to wake up, at least some of us, to wake up to what lies ahead.
Absolutely, Rajdeep. And on that note, I would like to congratulate and thank you and your team for taking this issue and following it up quite seriously. Everyone has to work together because, we just need to understand that we don't have that much time. We are already seeing the impacts of climate change and global warming. These things are intensifying and we just don't have time. And remember, to improve a weather forecasting system or a warning system, it is going to take more time. So we can't really sit back and relax and say, okay, this is just Wayanad. Like I said, today it's Wayanad. Tomorrow it could be some other place in India. And this thing has to stop. So we can't control the nature, but we have to improve our warning system. And that needs to be done on several fronts because, let me just take you one simple example of the warning fiasco that has happened. So right now we have got different color coded warning systems, like it's yellow, green, and then you have orange and then red. But there's a lot of confusion about this. Like, states say that we would just respond only when there is a red alert. But the center says that, red alert is a second step. You need to start acting whenever there is an orange alert. So this is not going to work like that. You need to have something which is very easy to understand. And that's something that people can, okay, this is what is going to happen. Let's just act. That's the only way forward. And everyone has to work together.
I think, in a way, what we are all in this together. This is a challenge which civil society faces as much as the state faces. and climate justice and issues of climate equality. These are all issues which are going to be dominating the discourse across the world in the next few decades. And India cannot be a step behind, certainly not a step behind. I want to give Dr. Prakash, because he joined us late, a quick final word. Dr. Prakash, do you believe that things will get better with time? That the more we have these wake-up calls, tragic as they may, it'll force society and the state to come together and recognize the climate emergency we face?
No, absolutely. I think I mean, unfortunately, that's the way it is happening. Is that when any big event like this happens, and then we get together, and then soon after that we forget about the whole issue. So that is, I think that the political acumen has to rise, and the political consensus has to come through. Otherwise, this is something which we will not be able to manage. That's number one. Number two is also about the civil society and the rise of the, making right noises, and also bringing forward a solution that is going to be, helpful for us. For example, IPCC reports have already been pointing out a broad, way in which these events are going to strike and what are the solutions that we have, but we have never implemented any of the solutions that has been prescribed. And that's where I think, and I feel that, again, to reiterate that the institutional framework in which we are working has to change. There has to be a coordinating ministry, right, which coordinates with all departments, and that's where the buck should lie. And otherwise, you fix responsibility for the state, for the center. That is where it has to work. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for us to manage it.